Why did I agree to do this? Why did I agree to do this? Why did I agree to do this? I don't know. Why did I agree to do this? Why did I agree to do this? Why did I agree to do this? I don't know! What's up, metalheads of the internet? How you doing? What's going on? You look great. Did you do something with your hair? Listen. Reviewing every Static X album. So, back in 2020, I had the audacity to review Project Regeneration Volume 1, not really knowing much about Static X, not really caring much about Static X, I didn't really care for it, and Static X fanboys lost their goddamn minds. Lots of name-calling, a few homophobic and ableist slurs here and there, a lot of wild accusations and threats of violence. A few people also told me that I was both a poser and an elitist. I'm not really sure how that works. I feel like by definition you can only be one of those at one time, but whatever. Fun little piece of Metal Meltdown trivia for some of y'all, for the long-time subscribers and followers. That was the first time I genuinely considered doing what we now call an angry fanboy drinking game. Like, the comments were just getting so weird and so wild, and obviously I never went ahead and did it, because that video doesn't exist, but the thought of that video stuck in my head for a long time, and then a year later, when Senjutsu from Iron Maiden came out, and the fans were trying to tear me a new fucking asshole, I went, alright, fuck it, angry fanboy drinking game. We didn't do it before, but let's do it now. So yeah, long story short, me, Static X, and the Static X fanbase, we don't pair together as well as, say, wine and cheese, or peanut butter and jelly, or chicken and waffles, or, you know, Ronnie Radke and pure utter stupidity and transphobia and being a big dumb asshole bully. But that video was released a long time ago, in a completely different era of the Metal Meltdown. I have changed a lot since the release of that video. I have changed physically, mentally, and I do feel that maybe in retrospect, I haven't really ever given Static X that much of a chance or opportunity. So I decided that in preparation for Project Regeneration Volume 2, I was going to sit down and really listen to every single Static X record to try to figure out what it is that people love about this band after all these years. So, yeah, reviewing every Static X album. Cool. Alright, let's go. As per the norm, I'm not interested in EPs, demos, live albums, compilations, or anything released by any kind of solo or side project. I'm interested only in the studio albums that Static X have released, and I will be talking about each of those albums in order of release, assigning each a score out of 5, 0 obviously being the worst, and 5 obviously being the best. The only official Static X studio album we will not be talking about today is Project Regeneration Volume 2. If you want to know what I think of that record, I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to wait a couple of days. You're just going to have to learn to exercise a little something called patience. First up, we have Wisconsin Death Trip, released in March 1999 via Warner Records Incorporated. In the past, I have argued that this is an incredibly overrated album. To be honest, I would still maybe make that argument. But, hear me out, but I will concede that it is in its own right a pretty decent, well-made, like, late 90s industrial record. It's got the snappy riffs, it's got the distorted, aggressive vocals, it's got those big, pummeling beats, and it feels like something that you could play at either a rave or at some, like, big outdoor dirty metal festival, and everyone would be happy. Like, there wouldn't be too much confusion. There wouldn't be too much, like, what the fuck is this? Like, everyone would be having fun. It fits both vibes quite nicely. I like a lot of the techno and EBM and industrial influences and sounds that pop in and out of the forefront of the sound, kind of giving this, like, a little bit of extra sizzle and flavor. The guitar tone, too, is especially beefy and burly, which adds a lot of weight to these really heavy chugs and these, like, snappy, groovy rhythms, and in general, this thing has a lot of energy and momentum. But goddamn, this record is fucking repetitive, and goddamn does it have some stupid fucking lyrics and choruses from time to time. Like, the album is just so one-dimensional, and it has nothing to say, and it simmers for far too long on the same rhythms and the same riffs and the same grooves and the same beats. There's some genuinely corny, laughable, vibe-killing moments as well. A lot of the vocal dynamics from Wayne Static come to mind, particularly in the song I'm With Stupid. There's a lot of wild, incessant yapping, and at one point, Wayne blurts out in this extremely exaggerated tone, "He's a loser!" By the time I get to about the middle of this album, I feel as if I've heard everything that I need to hear. There's nothing new being introduced, no new ideas, no new concepts, no new influences. A lot of the riffs start to bleed together and feel the same. It just kind of ends up feeling like a Ministry album, but made for like stupid college frat boys and jocks. I'm feeling a pretty flat 2.5 out of 5. I think listening to this in small doses is ultimately the way to go. I do think that some songs legitimately kinda go hard. Like, even in its goofiest moments, I was kinda riding with it up until about the halfway point. A thoroughly acceptable industrial metal album. Not as terrible as I once thought it was, but still arguably pretty overrated. Sorry, guys. Next up, we have Machine, released in May 2001 via Warner Records Incorporated. Once again, this is where Wayne Static really starts to put his foot down and kind of take over Static X. He becomes the Dave Mustaine of Static X, the guy, the man in charge. He's writing pretty much all of the material himself at this point, injecting Static X with his own unique electronic and industrial and metal influences. And in my opinion, this is for the best, because this album is meaner, it's tighter, it's bigger, it's better. It has more energy, it has more rage, it has more aggression, it has a little bit more variety as well. Some really strong riffs, some really strong beats, some more controlled, like, vocal dynamics as well. I mean, there's still some pretty wacky, over-the-top moments, but, like, it feels a little bit more earned, it feels a little bit more appropriate. It's basically the album that everyone keeps telling me that Wisconsin Death Trip is. I don't know how Static X fans feel about this particular album, but the way y'all describe Wisconsin Death Trip, I'm like, nah, that sounds more like Machine to me. Like, this thing kind of hits. This thing kind of goes hard, not gonna lie. I mean, you've got Get to the Gone, which has these genuinely pummeling percussive blasts and some super tight, like, machine gun industrial metal riffage. You've got Etsego Undead, which has these zanier moments and these weird, like, industrial textures and electronic textures, a little bit of an alternative rock kind of underbelly. It almost has the drive and the momentum of, like, a White Zombie number, but channeling something like Jerry Was a Race Car Driver from Ministry. You're seeing some moodier, slower grooves and some new metal influence come through on stuff like Black and White and Cold, and they're not my favorite tracks, but honestly, they do the job. Like, they're dark and edgy in, like, kind of a really fun, nostalgic way. Like, I can kind of get down with that for just a hot minute. Like, it's all good. I really like Burn to Burn as well. Like, it has these cool, jagged, swelling grooves, and it just feels, like, really menacing. I'm feeling a 4 out of 5. I honestly had a lot of fun listening to this, so much so that I can't help but wonder why this isn't held in the same regard as Wisconsin Death Trip. Because again, in my opinion, this is just a much better album in every way. This is everything that I keep getting told that Wisconsin Death Trip is. I don't fucking get it. I hope I'm not in the minority on this, but considering how much people love Wisconsin Death Trip, I'm guessing I am. Whatever. 4 out of 5. I dig it. Next up, we have Shadow Zone, released in October 2003 via Warner Records Incorporated once again. Now we're starting to see some behind-the-scenes drama and tension and toxicity bleed over into the Static X sound. Basically, Wayne Static resented the rest of Static X for not helping him out with the aforementioned machine. The rest of Static X, somewhat ironically, resented Wayne for not allowing them to be more involved with the writing process and creation and production of Machine. There was also a lot of pressure to try to recreate the sound and the success of Wisconsin Death Trip, and Wayne was also working closely with Jonathan Davis at the time for some kind of movie soundtrack, and as a result, there were some more melodic and, like, alternative influences being further brought into Static X. The result is an album that isn't necessarily terrible or incompetent, but definitely mediocre and confused. It simply doesn't really know what it wants to be, and as a result, it kind of spends a lot of time meandering on underdeveloped hooks and melodies, on uninspired riffs and movements, on lethargic songwriting and songcraft. It doesn't have much energy or momentum to speak of, and it gets downright fucking lame and boring when Static X start to indulge more so in these like Korn-esque nu metal influences. It's very clear that Wayne spending as much time with Jonathan Davis as he was around this time, it's not helping Static X. I mean, cuts like New Pain, All in Wait, The Only, like, these would work fine on, like, a modern-day Korn release, like on something like Requiem from 2022. But, you know, on a fucking Static X album in 2003? Nuh-uh. It just kind of feels like Static X are going through the motions on this thing. I'm feeling a 1.5 out of 5, I guess leaning towards a 2, because it's not, like, horrible or anything, but, you know, a 1.5 out of 5 nonetheless. Next up, we have Start a War, released in June 2005 via Warner Records Incorporated. Once again, Wayne Static is quoted as saying that with this album, they wanted to recreate the fun spirit of Wisconsin Death Trip, and technically speaking, mission accomplished, because it's not as much of a bummer or a bore as Shadow Zone. Mind you, some of those more melodic and moody sounds and shades do still exist on this album, but overall, yeah, this probably does have more in line with a fun album than a not fun album. Like, everything is a little sharper and a little tighter again, things are a little bit more rabid, there's a little bit more power, more of those snappy breakneck rhythms, and some more classic industrial metal grooves and barrages as well. It's also just a more aggressive album with darker, more violent lyricism and some more screaming vocals as well. I'd say it's like 75% Wisconsin Death Trip and like 25% Shadow Zone, and it mostly works. By design, this album has some of the same issues that I have with Wisconsin Death Trip, but overall, it does have everything that most people want from a Static X album, and it does appear that everyone is actually enjoying themselves, and the music isn't horrible. Like, I don't really care for I'm the One and Skinny Man, but I can get down with Dirt House, and I want to fucking break it, you know? Solid, flat, middle-of-the-road 2.5 out of 5 for me. It's okay. Whatever. Next up, we have Cannibal, released in April 2007 via Reprise Records, and voila, yet another Static X album that I actually kind of like. If Start a War was meant to kind of recapture the, quote, fun spirit of Wisconsin Death Trip, then I kind of feel like this album, Cannibal, is in a way recapturing the fun spirit of Machine. It's beefy and gnarly and very abrasive. There are some legitimately, like, big, burly, nasty fucking grooves here, and a lot of fucking hype and brutality. We're toning down the melodic influences, but we're bringing in, like, some guitar solos, which I think is actually pretty cool. Kind of gives this, like, a modern groove metal kind of flair. Like, it kind of puts it up there with something from, like, Lamb of God or Machine Head in a way. It's probably Static X at their most, like, full-blown metal, but I honestly think it really works for them. Like, songs like No Submission and Chemical Logic are filled with, like, brazen, cybernetic thrash madness. They're legitimately quite volatile. Then there's Behemoth, which combines some hypercharged double-time dance beats and some, like, aggressive, chunky bits of metal shrapnel. The guitar solo here I actually think is pretty inventive, too. Like, it kind of sounds like Tom Morello just, like, doing a fuckload of cocaine. There's definitely a few big-time duds on here, like Destroyer and Chromomatic, but all in all, I actually think it's a pretty good record. I'm feeling a 3.5 out of 5, and I would say this is probably my second favorite from Static X. My favorite, I would feel comfortable saying, is Machine at this point. Next up, we have Cult of Static, released in March 2009 via Reprise Records, and holy shit, what an absolutely massive drop-off in quality once again! I don't know what the fuck keeps happening, but this has happened twice, and I can't help but feel like this is not a coincidence. Like, every time they release something I like, the next album just fucking sucks. Like, what the fuck? At least with Shadow Zone, I can say that they were at least trying to expand the sound, bringing in more melodic influences, bringing in clean vocals, you know, like nu metal, alternative metal vibes. With Cult of Static, it just sounds like everyone in the band is, they're not on speaking terms, they're not talking to each other, and it results in some incredibly lackluster, half-assed material. Like, there's just nothing interesting about this record. There are no memorable hooks, no badass riffs. Like, the album is just churning out, excreting this very generic, unenthusiastic, and frankly, poorly produced industrial rock schlock. Like, everything just has this really empty, paper thin kind of feel to it. There's no weight, there's no oomph, there's just nothing. And you have a song called Lunatic, featuring Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, and apparently this song was written for the Punisher Warzone soundtrack, and like, I hear all that, and I'm like, okay, that's an opportunity to just create an over-the-top, stupid, edgy banger. And it's a fucking dud! It's one of the biggest duds on the album, and it opens the album too! So you just have this, like, feeling of stink all through it. Like, Static X basically makes the kind of music that I would expect to hear in some dark, over-the-top, corny-ass 2000s comic book movie, and then they get hired to work on a dark, edgy 2000s comic book movie, and they get Dave Mustaine to help them out, and they fuck it up. What the fuck is going on? That says it all, right fucking there. Pure incompetence, in my opinion. The drama and tension and friction was simply too much for Static X to handle and control while making this album. Fukuda wanted to focus more on his new family, and Oshiro's newfound sobriety was clashing with Static's substance abuse. Campos would later call this stage of the band a toxic environment. Not too long after the release of this album, Wayne Static would be working on a project called Pighammer, Tony Campos would join Soulfly, and Static X for a while would just kind of stop. I mean, it was eventually reactivated by Wayne Static in like 2013, I believe, and then it kind of continued in a way until he passed, and now it obviously still continues again in a different capacity. The Static X that you guys know and love and recognize as Static X died with this album. I mean, this really is just an awful, awful fucking record in my opinion. I'm feeling a strong 1 out of 5. Maybe leaning towards a 0.5 out of 5. For me, a 0.5 out of 5 means that it's like an insulting record, and I'm not like insulted by this, so that score feels disingenuous, but ooh, I'm fucking tempted because it really is just an awful, awful fucking record. And finally, we have Project Regeneration Volume 1, released in July 2020 via the Estego Entertainment Group and the Orchard Music. A little bit of context for y'all, a little bit of backstory, lore, if you will. Wayne Static operates and tours under the name Static X, kind of, sort of, for a little bit in the early 2010s, until passing away in 2014. And then the rest of Static X decides that they're going to reform Static X with Edsel Dope on lead vocals, who is playing a character called Zero, and he's wearing a weird Wayne Static zombie kind of cosplay. It's tacky and creepy and gross, but whatever, that's not really what we're here to talk about. They also decide that they're going to release a new album, and the skeleton of that album is going to be comprised of demos and tapes and like a lot of unused songs and unreleased songs that Wayne had been working on for Static X, like, throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s. The existence of this album in and of itself, I just think is kind of fucked up, because you've got a man dressed up as a zombie version of Wayne Static, working with people who were not on the best of terms with Wayne before he passed. Like, they were not friends, they were not buddies, they were not cool. Like, taking his songs that he didn't think were good enough to be on a Static X album, or were just flat out unfinished, and using that to make a brand new album. It's kind of cold, it's kind of cruel, I think it's pandering, I think it's nostalgia bait. And I'm not gonna lie, these thoughts and feelings I have are continuing to influence how I feel about Project Regeneration Volume 1. Like, I just don't like this in theory. This is something I've talked about a lot. It's something I'll continue to talk about a lot, because I still think it's weird and gross. And it's even weirder and grosser that they're still doing it nearly 3.5 years later with another Project Regeneration album. But as far as the music itself is concerned, separating art from the artist and doing our damnedest to just look only at the fucking art, it's fine. It's fine. Okay? It's fine. I concede that I overreacted and it's not the total snore fest or cringe fest that I thought it was back in 2020, but it's not a fucking masterpiece either, alright? It definitely kind of taps into that 90s industrial club rave feel, which I do think is actually pretty cool. It is a little glossy and overproduced at times. Static X are clearly trying to fill in whatever holes may exist in these unreleased and unfinished songs, trying to compensate for the fact that Wayne Static isn't there. I am, as a result, reminded of, like, the posthumous albums that Michael Jackson released after he passed away. But I can't deny that some of these songs, they do kind of hit. They do kind of get the job done. Like, I might not be a big fan of Dead Souls or Bring You Down, but Terminator Oscillator and Estego Placebo, they kind of hit, all right? They kind of hit. You got me. I'm feeling a 2.5 out of 5 on this bad boy. I definitely don't hate this album as much as I did back in 2020, but it's still not great. It still just has this really hollow, heartless, empty kind of feel to it. And it's because Wayne isn't there. Like, for better or for worse, he was the mastermind behind Static X, alright? He was their Lemmy Kilmister, their Dave Mustaine, their Trent Reznor. And, you know, just like how Motorhead, Megadeth, and Nine Inch Nails can't continue without Lemmy, Dave, and Trent, I'd argue Static X can't or shouldn't continue without Wayne. And this album kind of shows why, you know? Like, they have to fill in all these holes, they have to fill in all these gaps, they have to kind of like Frankenstein all these unfinished songs and all these underdeveloped songs into something that's listenable. And to their credit, they did it. Like, it works. I definitely prefer this over fucking Cult of Static and Shadow Zone, to be fair. But there's also just something deeply cynical about this whole thing and how it's put together and the fact that it even exists that I just can't fucking shake. And voila! Reviewing every Static X album. This was alright. This kind of reminds me of the reviewing every Korn album video, where I'm like, there's a lot of albums I like, a lot of albums I don't like, and a lot that I'm just like, what the fuck happened here? I was able to get some genuine enjoyment out of Machine and Cannibal. I was able to change my mind, or at least be a little bit more positive towards Wisconsin Death Trip, and I guess technically Project Regeneration Volume 1. I don't hate it the way I did in 2020. And I also learned about albums like Shadow Zone and Start a War and The Cult of Static, which I did not even listen to beforehand. And I'm wishing I hadn't listened to them, because they're not great. But hey, I can say that I listened to them. I can say that I've heard every Static X album and I understand them, so I'm gonna fight tooth and nail when some Static X fanboy comes in here on fucking Friday and goes, "You fucking get it." Fuck you! I'm 5 steps ahead of you, motherfucker! Now it's your turn to tell me how you would score and rank every album in the Static X discography. Press this button to subscribe. Look, there's even more videos here. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.